Welcome to Stout Conversations, where every week we sit down with creative thinkers in the craft beer industry and beyond. Your hosts, Ken and April, live and work in a 24-foot RV, traveling the country in search of great stories around a great beer. If the brewery doesn't go well, we can pray. If the church doesn't go well, we can drink. You heard that right. This week, amidst the buzz of an active taproom, Ken talks with Christian Cryder, owner of Lazarus Brewing Company in East Austin, Texas. Christian is both a brewery owner and pastor and has brilliantly figured out the age-old equation that beer and conversation can change the world. Or at least his little area of it.
What I know is that you were a minister, right?
Still am.
Still a minister?
Still
okay.
am. Yeah, so this is like my third
You went
career.
to seminary school and you started ministry in Missoula, Montana?
Yep, that's correct. So
that wasn't even the first time.
No, third career. First career, 14 years in software. Got to the point where I was like, I really want to do something a little more meaningful and lasting. And I thought, maybe I should go into ministry, which is brutal. Good, but it's really tough in a lot of ways. And so we went to seminary in Philadelphia and moved back to Montana, where I was from. So second career was kind of planting the church for people who had given up on church. And that's really where I fell in love with kind of the brewing scene. I'd fallen in love with beer before that, but that's when I discovered taprooms and the culture that happens in taprooms. And I was like, these are people who love that. So that, spent 7 years doing that. Along the way, we had started a nonprofit. It was not a religious nonprofit, it was just help people help each other. So connecting needs with volunteers, super simple. That thing blew up in a really good way. We had like 700 volunteers, and we were a tiny little church that couldn't even pay for our own salaries. So we needed to hire somebody to run that thing. I remember thinking, I need a fundraiser. And so our church was called All Souls, and I thought, that's kind of a cool beer name, All Souls Ale. And so I got a meeting with a brewery in Missoula. It's Big Sky Brewing Company, Montana's biggest brewery, great brewery.
Yeah.
And got a meeting with the owner. His name's Bjorn. Sat down and I said, hey, I'm a pastor. It's a little church called All Souls. I'm not here to talk to you about the church, but I do want you to brew a beer. Call it All Souls Ale. Give me all the profits to this nonprofit. And there was a long silence. And then he goes, Bjorn's a great guy. He goes, nobody's ever actually asked us to do this before, let alone the church. And he said, everybody wants free beer. Everybody wants money. Nobody's ever said, like, let's partner on something. And he goes, I like it, let's do it. So for 5 years, once a year, Christmas time, we brew this 11% Imperial Saison. Wow. We wanted a Belgian style beer that's kind of a nod to the monastics, the monks. So for 5 years we did this. The community's response was like, when they drink the beer, and they were like, we like this. This is actually really cool. So you had a church partnering with the brewery to support this nonprofit, and the community was actually really receptive. And Bjorn, my friend, was every time we'd get together, he'd talk about that, and he'd say, "You've got to start a brewery." And I'm like, "Dude, I'm a pastor." And he goes, and this happened multiple times. He's like, "Look, I don't go to church, but I know my brewing history." He goes, "Pastors used to do this," and what he meant was the monks, the nuns. Right. He actually said, "Listen, there wouldn't be a craft beer revolution in America today if it hadn't been 1,000 years of monks brewing beer, Christianity, like this massive brewing tradition over in Europe." And he goes, so in our country we've kind of divorced those two things. And he's like, dude, you got to put those back. And I was like, it's crazy, it's crazy. So for 5 years I was like, no. And then I finally got to the point of knowing I wanted to, I'm still really passionate about planting churches. Like, I love creating little churches for people who've kind of given up on church. So, unchurched, de-churched, burned by the church, pissed at the church. I don't know why I'm in church. I'm like, have a beer. We'll figure. I mean, I love hanging out with people like that.
To me, my opinion of Montana, that's a very Montana-like approach to church too, right?
Like, I just love hanging out with creatives. I love hanging out with...
You picked a good city in Austin, right?
So this was funny is... I wanted a city with a Western feel. So Austin is not on my radar.
Really?
Yeah. So here, I'm from Montana. So we looked at Seattle, we looked at Portland, we looked at Denver, we looked at San Francisco. They're all great cities. where they all had mature beer scenes, and none of them felt quite right. And a friend of mine who was living down here, I was talking to him on the phone. He's like, "Dude, why aren't you looking at Austin?" And I'm like, "Austin's in Texas." And he goes, "Shut the fuck up. Come visit." He goes, "Austin has more in common with those western cities than it does with any place in Texas. Texas has kind of this guns and trucks and rugged individualism, which Montana has. And I grew up, knowing how to hunt and kill and shoot things and live in the mountains, and I enjoyed it. But we were living in Missoula, which is a super progressive college town, thoughtful people, blue city and red states. Everything that was awesome about Missoula, I feel like Austin is that amped up 100 times. Magnified. And there's a creativity down here, and like everybody's got their startups. And it has some of the West Coast, that you see in San Francisco and Seattle, some of that Portland maybe, but just kind of the energy. And it was like, oh my gosh, this place feels so comfortable. And so we moved to Texas back in end of 2013 to try to do this crazy thing of like, is it possible to be a pastor and start another church in a city like this, and to also have a full-time job, start a business that embeds us in the heart of the city in a way that that people can appreciate, even if they don't share any of my convictions, don't give a rat's ass about it. It's like, hey, do you like beer and coffee and food and space and people? Okay, check. It's for you. And so that was the big experiment, was to see, is it possible to actually do those two things at once? And what we found is, I think it actually is. I've had to learn a ton about what it means to like be a business owner, what it means to start a business, to run a business, to raise capital,
and you're in a business where you have to navigate all kinds of strange laws and regulations, and especially here in Texas. I mean, you started late 2016. Were you even able to sell beer in a tap room yet?
Yeah, we were.
You could at that point. Was that right after that happened?
2013. This was a big part of why we came here. Middle of 2013, Texas passed the laws that they basically loosened up the laws both for breweries and for brew pubs. So brew pubs could sell product to go. They could always serve on premise, but they could sell product to go. They could self-distribute. And then breweries could actually start to sell on premise, technically. Seeing the laws change and having this philosophy, what I call like a West Coast tap room. It's tap room focused. We don't do any distribution. If you want a beer, you've got to come here. It's all about on-premise experience. It's the kind of thing we loved about Portland. You see it in Denver.
Yeah.
And so we were like, what if we did that here? And we didn't see many other people doing that here. And so we kind of went, there's an opportunity.
Well, and you've done a cool crossover with coffee.
Yeah.
And food. Food is obviously that happens, but coffee's a little bit unique.
We've been
on the brewery
passionate
side
about coffee. This is one thing we never saw in Missoula. We never saw breweries that did coffee, but my wife has roasted coffee for like 14 years.
Right.
And so what I've realized is when I was brewing, I always drank a lot of coffee in the morning, and then like roll over to beer.
You weren't the guy that started on a beer?
No, I paced myself.
It's hard, 10, 12-hour brew days.
But, we were sitting there going, look, at the end of the day, if we're going to create a business, let's focus on the things that we love. We love beer. We like coffee. We moved down here and fell in love with street tacos. Right. And it was like, okay, what if we just do those things and create a space that allows us, that'd give us something to do all day long. We're doing coffee in the mornings, it just rolls over into beer in the afternoons and evenings. Street tacos, you can have breakfast tacos in the morning, regular tacos afternoon and evening. It was like, okay. And we didn't see anybody else really doing that combination of things. So we thought, well, either we're crazy or we're brilliant. And I think it's actually been really good. So I don't know if we're brilliant, but it's been good.
So it's worked out on the business end of things?
It's been really good.
That's good. I mean, you've created a really unique space. And, you've got a pretty interesting trail. The theme of the brewery, the name is Lazarus.
There's little bits and pieces,
and,
clues.
The whole Lazarus thing, I love the name because as I found out more about your story, it's like, okay, I see that you've kind of been reborn a few times over the years, from software to ministry to beer. And you said you're still a minister.
Yes, because Bjorn was just like, dude, you have one of the most amazing stories. You're kind of like this, you're a man of the cloth, but somebody that can relate to people. And in Europe, like, this would be no big deal. You know, there's still monasteries that are brewing beer, and people dig it. If you're open and honest and authentic about who you are, I think most people, they might think you're freaking nuts, but they'll actually be like, well, at least you're honest.
I don't think the beer crowd, though, with the craft beer crowd too much, because this is a different scene than a bar. You know,
we're not.
I think people who come for craft beer, they want that intellectual conversation. Sometimes they're just hanging out playing cornhole or whatever and throwing darts. But I think there's a lot of room for that authenticity that is missing in, you know, drinking a mass-produced beer to get hammered. You know, that's not what people are usually doing at the craft beer scene. So we're not here to get sloshed.
Yep. Our story, the fact that is my story. Like, people are like, "You're still a minister." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm still a minister." It allows us to lean into, you know, the name, some of the themes. We can kind of make fun of ourselves a little bit and kind of take joy. And, you know, we've got our IPA, 40 days and 40 nights.
Well, and if that wasn't your story, it would just be a shtick.
Then it would
just be a shtick. It would just be a marketing gimmick. But you own it. It is you. It's born out of you, not the other way around. So it's still
great for us.
What do you do? What's your, if you don't mind me asking, what's the ministry side of it now? Are you still active in ministering at a church? Or
I have, you know, it's important. I think one of the things you learn how to navigate is public space. It's really important when people are coming to a restaurant or a bar or a brewery or whatever. They think, I'm going to a restaurant, bar, or brewery. And if they walk in and all of a sudden they're like, what the fuck? There's a church service going on. That would be a little weird. That's actually really disrespectful.
Right.
Like, if somebody's going to come, they need to come because they knew what they were coming for, and so
that makes a lot of sense.
So it's actually just really important to kind of be authentic about who you are, respectful of where other people are. We also are a really small church, so like right now we fit in my living room. So we got a little church, 25, 30 people, meets in my living room on Sunday mornings, and basically I've had to completely relearn how I pastor, because most of the times when you pastor, I think a lot of times for us pastors, the way we feel good about ourselves, like, am I doing a good job? Am I working really hard? Am I busy all the time? And, well, there's not enough time in the day. Brewery is a full-time job. Ministry is a full-time job. So in some ways, I'm having to learn how to pastor as an ordinary person, not a privileged person who has a salary that, you know, pays for 40 hours a week with big buildings, stuff like that. It's like, no, I'm just like everybody else. And that means there's a lot of things we don't do as a church. We don't have any programming. We don't have any staff to speak of. People come and visit, and I'm like, everything you're looking for in a church or a pastor, I'm going to disappoint you. But if you want to learn, what does it look like? Is it possible to actually be a Christian? What does that mean? To follow Jesus and to see your job as it's kind of the place where God's called you to be a blessing to the community He's planted you in, good for the city. That's what I'm doing. So I'm basic for people who want to learn how to see their job the way I see my job, and where their faith really motivates why they're doing what they're doing for the good of other people. We're a really good place because they can come in and they're learning from somebody who's walking the exact same path that they are. I'm just like them. Except I've been to seminary, so I've had some life experience.
But to me, it sounds like almost like a craft ministry. It's almost like taking, craft beer is like this focus of good quality instead of just being a mass production thing, and you're taking that and almost applying it, and, not to...
No.
And you're getting to the essence of your ministry.
What goes into making craft beer? What goes into making community?
Yeah.
And they actually, somebody could say, you're taking secrets of craft beer and learning how to do a church from it, or They could also say, it's equally true, maybe we're taking the secrets of what early Christianity was and learning how to apply it to beer, which happens to work both ways.
And what you're doing, I know, is similar to how you started your ministry in Missoula as well, right? You started out just meeting with people over a beer or something, and then it kind of became more and more people meeting together, and it became a ministry, and then it became a church, and then it blossomed.
It's crazy. Well, you don't have to be crazy, but it helps.
Crazy, a little crazy.
A little crazy, right? Yeah. And then beer helps along the way. The great thing is, I tell people, like, look, if the brewery doesn't go well, we can pray. If the church doesn't go well, we can drink. I think between the two things, we got it covered.
I'll tell you what, if I was going to go to church and I lived in Austin, I think I would like yours.
It's definitely...
I think I would enjoy exploring Christianity out here in your state.
We're a good place for people that have questions. You know, we say all the time, you don't have to share any of our convictions in order to be our friends. And I think way too many churches start with like, hey, do you agree with us on this, and this? If you agree, we'll love you. And if you don't agree, we're going to shun you. And I kind of think it's actually really helpful to have people... Some of the best people in my life, people that have done the most good for me, actually don't buy what I believe. They don't believe what I believe. They don't share my convictions. And so they ask really good questions. It's like if you're building a business plan, the worst thing in the world is just have a bunch of folks that are just yes people. Oh, that sounds great, sounds great. So you actually need people that are like, is that really a good idea? And what that does is it forces you to think. You have to really think, and you're either going to make that idea better and better and better, or you're going to go, that's a dumb idea, and you're going to chuck it. Either one of those is a better solution because your idea's been tested. But in order to have that, we ought to approach our spirituality the same way, where we go, I want to surround myself with thoughtful people that are living their lives very intentionally, but that are as diverse as possible from myself. And that's going to help me have a more thoughtful perspective on who I am and how I'm living intentionally. We may agree, we may not agree, but we'll probably really shed light on each other. And you know what? We may find out that we actually enjoy a lot of the same things, and that there can actually be genuine friendship even in spite of real disagreements. Which this country could freaking use that.
Exactly. That's what I was just about to say. I will say cheers to that.
I tell people sometimes, they're like, why Lazarus? And I'm like, well, listen, here's the short answer. I've met a ton of people, you know, the image of death to life. I meet a ton of people. I've never met anybody that's like, you know what we need in this world? We need more death. Everybody's like, no, we need more life. And I think that's something we actually all agree on. We need a little more civility, a lot more respect, a lot more charity. We need things that are good and beautiful and true, and we need to kind of go like, we're friends. We need people to learn how to talk across the aisle. And I think that some of the things that happen around beers actually would really benefit churches. They would also benefit politics. And just like people, like community. Like, in other words, there's something good about the brewing scene that what it does for people, what it does for community, stuff like that. So
some of the best things, the best conversations we ever had are had over a good beer.
It's amazing. Everybody gets honest, and everybody kind of chills the fuck out, and is like, well, let's stop. So, yeah, I'm a fan.
So here's the voice from behind the camera.
Yeah.
One of the things we like to ask too is like, so knowing kind of what a stout life is to us is like a full, authentic, genuine life. Exactly what you're talking about. Yep. So how would you define your stout life?
Well, it's definitely full. To me, so first of all, I realize how much. So we're doing, like the crazy thing is we're doing 2 full-time jobs. In some ways, I have a little church full of 30 people in my living room on Sundays, but I also have a business full of 30 people that I have, like just my employees. So a big part of what I'm doing is just learning how to lead people in one aspect, a faith community, but also learning how to lead people in a business. How do we be a great business? What do we care about? What do we value? So that takes 6 days of my week, you know, and then Sundays are my day off, and they're full of people too. So learning how to be balanced and how to be smart and not trying to do everything and figuring out what can I do, what can't I do, how do I find people that can help me do the things that I don't have the time to do, how do I hand things off, how do I train people in order to be able to hand things off. It has something to do with that. Our life is very full. I absolutely love what we're doing. When my wife and I decided to try to do this, I said, whatever we do here, it's got to be sustainable. Like if we do this and it just fries us, that's not worth doing. And so we have to go into it going, is it possible to have these two full-time jobs that seem to be really separate from one another? Is there a way to like integrate them where I can be the same person in both places? And in a way that doesn't kill us, but actually is really life-giving. And I think the answer is yes. So, yeah, we're sitting here going, this is kind of crazy, but it works, at least for us. And that's super, super exciting. Like, I'm looking at this going, this is what I want to do for the next 20 years. Start breweries, help start churches, this kind of fusion, help teach other people how to do that. So, yeah. Good. I don't know if that was a good answer, but it's a good question.
No, it's a great.
All right, cheers. Let there be hops. Then there was beer. And it was good. There are new episodes with new conversations every Sunday night. Be sure to subscribe and click the little gray bell so you don't miss out.